You ever wonder why so many men walk into marriage believing it's the safest decision they'll ever make, only to realize later it was the most dangerous? Not because of love itself, but because of the risks no one warned them about. Risks that can cost you your peace, your money, your future, and in some cases, your very identity. This isn't a scare tactic. This is a truth men have learned the hard way, and I'm going to lay it out for you before you step into something you might not be ready for. Stay, because what I'm about to tell you could save you years of regret. Most men step into marriage believing they've found a fortress, a shelter from the storms of life, a place where loyalty is rewarded, love protects, and both partners will stand shoulder to shoulder no matter what. It's a beautiful picture, but pictures can be deceiving. In reality, marriage is only as safe as the two people building it. If one begins to withdraw, even a little cracks appear. If one starts keeping score instead of giving freely, those cracks widen. And in today's world, the structure isn't what it once was. Once upon a time, marriage was anchored by community, faith, and shared duty. Today, it can be anchored to little more than personal happiness, which can change overnight. The vows, they don't always mean what you think they mean. For some, for better or worse, really means, for as long as I feel fulfilled. And the system you're stepping into, it isn't built to protect both equally. Sometimes, it can work against you, especially if you're a man who gives more than he guards. A man who sacrifices freely, without safeguards, can wake up one day to find that the fortress he thought he built together has become someone else's castle, and he's been locked outside. When you're in love, danger doesn't feel like danger. It feels exciting, it feels warm, it feels safe. In those early months, everything looks mutual. You're both giving, you're both showing up. The scales feel balanced, but over time, the balance can shift, and it rarely shifts all at once. It happens in small moments, almost invisible. A disagreement that turns into a habit of avoiding certain topics. A compromise that becomes a one-sided rule. A joke that's really a criticism, but you let it slide. What used to be a partnership turns into a negotiation. What used to be open conversation becomes guarded replies, and sometimes manipulation takes root. By the time you see the danger clearly, you're already deep inside a system that makes walking away costly, not just in money but in energy, identity, and years of your life. It's like being in a room that slowly fills with smoke. At first, you barely notice. Then, suddenly, you can't breathe, and the door you thought was open is locked from the outside. The first big, undeniable risk: money. Marriage binds your finances together, and that can sound romantic in theory. Two incomes, shared dreams, pooling resources to build a life. But here's the truth. If that life falls apart, the fallout isn't shared equally. A divorce doesn't just split assets. It can take decades of work, savings, and investments. Even the retirement you planned for gone or cut in half. And if children are involved, the numbers get bigger. You may be paying support for years, sometimes for the rest of your life. The law? It's not neutral. It doesn't always reward the one who built the foundation. In fact, it often punishes him, especially if he's the primary earner. Many men discover too late that the system doesn't just divide fairly. It redistributes in ways that leave them starting over from zero. The brutal part? It's not just the money. It's the time you can't get back. The years you spent building, erased in a few court dates. That's why walking into marriage without understanding financial exposure is like signing a blank check with your future written on it. Not all risks are loud. Some are quiet, silent, slow. Emotional erosion doesn't announce itself. It creeps in, one small dismissal at a time. One unkind word was brushed off as just a joke. At first you shrug it off. You tell yourself, it's not a big deal. But little by little, your boundaries start to fade. The way your leadership gets questioned, the way your opinions get minimized, the way your efforts become expected, not appreciated. Over months, maybe years, you stop bringing up certain topics. Not because you agree, but because you're tired of the reaction. You stop asking for what you need because it feels pointless. And one day, you realize you haven't felt truly respected in a long time. This is how a man's confidence erodes. Not in a sudden collapse, but in a slow leak. It's the death of self-respect by 1,000 small cuts. By the time many men notice it, they've already adapted to living smaller, speaking softer, expecting less. The danger? You begin to believe this is just how it is, and you forget that love without respect isn't love at all. Marriage is about compromise. That's the promise. But for many men, compromise slowly becomes surrender. At first, you're just making small adjustments. You skip a night out with friends because she's had a long day. You drop a hobby because weekends are couple time. It feels fair. It feels like a partnership. But over time, the list grows. Your schedule is negotiated. Your downtime is approved or denied. Your social circle shrinks. And if you're with the wrong partner, those rules only tighten. Until one day, you realize you're asking permission to live your own life. It's not about avoiding accountability. It's about preserving your ability to be yourself. Your friendships, your interests, your independence. These are not luxuries. They're part of what makes you a whole man. The irony? The more you give up your individuality, the less attractive you often become to your partner. Because the spark that drew her in was tied to the man, you were not the version that's been trimmed down to fit. Freedom isn't selfish. It's the oxygen of a healthy relationship. Without it, even love can suffocate. Here's what many men don't understand until they're sitting in a courtroom. Marriage is more than love. It's a legal contract. When it ends, it's not feelings that decide your future, it's paperwork. Judges, formulas, precedents set by people who don't know you, don't know your story, and don't need to. You might think the court will see your side, but the court isn't there to take sides. It's there to apply the law, and the law doesn't care who tried harder. The default agreements? They're not designed with you in mind. They're designed for efficiency. And efficiency doesn't feel fair when it's your life being divided. This is why prenups and clear agreements matter. Not because you expect to fail, but because the cost of not planning can be devastating. A man who walks into marriage without understanding the legal framework is like a pilot taking off without knowing where the emergency exits are. Love may be the reason you step into it, but law will be the reason you can't step out without scars. Many men know this moment. Before marriage, she's warm, affectionate, playful. She listens. She laughs at your jokes. She reaches for your hand without thinking. Then, sometime after the vows, something changes. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. A little less warmth. A little more criticism. A little less curiosity about your day. It's not always about malice. Sometimes it's comfort. Sometimes complacency. Sometimes a quiet loss of respect. But the man feels it. And when he brings it up, he's told he's imagining things. That it's normal. That it's just what happens after marriage. The danger here isn't just the shift itself. It's believing you can't do anything about it. That you have to accept this as the new reality. Men who ignore this switch often find themselves in a slow emotional drought. They still live together, still talk, still function. But the connection that made it worth building is fading, and they don't know how to bring it back. If you notice the switch, don't just hope it flips back on its own. Hope is not a strategy. In modern marriage, men face a paradox. You're told to lead, but not too much. To provide, but not expect gratitude. To be strong, but also soft, on demand. And inside marriage, these mixed messages can double. You may be judged on how much money you make, and also how many chores you do. You may be expected to handle the hard decisions, but also blamed when those decisions are unpopular. Over time, the pressure builds. You're carrying the weight of responsibility without the reassurance of appreciation. And if you're not careful, you start to live for her approval instead of your own principles. That's dangerous. Because the moment you abandon your core values just to keep the peace, you've started losing yourself. And when a man loses himself, he loses the very thing that made him valuable in the first place. Marriage should be partnership, not performance. If you find yourself constantly auditioning for acceptance, you're not in a marriage. You're in a contract where the terms keep changing. Here's the truth that shatters illusions. Love is essential, but it's not sufficient. A marriage can be full of love and still fail. Because love without respect becomes frustration. Love without shared purpose becomes aimless. Love without mutual sacrifice becomes one-sided service. Many men believe love can fix incompatibility. That if they just love harder, it will heal the disrespect. That if they love enough, it will erase bitterness. It won't. In fact, in the wrong dynamic, Loving more can make you lose more because it invites more taking, not more giving. Love can inspire effort, but effort in the wrong soil only grows resentment. The truth is, you need respect, shared vision, and a willingness from both sides to fight for each other, not against each other. Without those, love becomes a memory you're trying to keep alive while the present keeps draining it. This isn't about fear, it's about clarity. Before you commit, ask the hard questions. Does she respect how I lead? Do our values match beyond attraction? Is she here for who I am or for what I can provide? If the worst happened, would I still respect myself for choosing her? Have the hard talks early, about money, about roles, about family, sex, conflict, and future plans. If a subject feels awkward, that's the one you should tackle first. Put agreements in writing. Not because you expect to fail, but because if life ever forces you apart, those papers will protect dignity, time, and peace. And above all, protect your identity. Don't give up your mission, your principles, or your self-respect for the sake of keeping the peace. Because peace bought with self-betrayal isn't peace at all. Marriage can be the most beautiful alliance of your life, or the most expensive lesson you'll ever learn. The difference isn't luck. It's clarity. It's preparation. It's knowing who you are and refusing to trade that for anyone's approval. You don't have to fear marriage, but you do have to respect the weight of it. Because once you step in, the cost of stepping out is measured in more than money. It's measured in time, in trust, in pieces of yourself you may never get back. So count the cost. Ask the questions no one else will ask for you. Protect your freedom. Guard your peace. And build from a place where love is given freely, not demanded as a debt. If you choose marriage, choose it with your eyes open. If you choose to stay single, choose it without shame. Either way, let it be your choice. Because the life you live after is the life you'll have to answer for.